Stella laughed. Alexander leaned forward smiling, his champagne glass halfway to his lips, eyes fixed completely on her face. Around them the restaurant hummed quietly. Glasses clinking. Low conversations. Candlelight dancing across white tablecloths. "Excuse me," Stella said softly, dabbing her lips with a napkin. "I will be right back." Alexander watched her stand. Watched her walk gracefully across the restaurant. He picked up his champagne, still smiling, and looked out the window. Stella turned the corner toward the restroom. And stopped. She pressed herself quietly into the dark alcove just beyond the candlelight. Back flat against the wall. She reached into her clutch bag. Phone out. Camera on. She angled it slowly around the edge of the alcove toward their table. Waiting. 30 seconds passed. Then she saw him. Dark jacket. Moving along the edge of the room. Eyes fixed on one thing. Her champagne glass. Stella kept completely still. Phone steady. The man reached the table. Checked left. Checked right. His back to the room. One hand moved fast. 2 seconds. Something small dropped into her champagne glass. He straightened immediately and turned back toward the side exit. Stella was already moving. She came up behind him just as he pushed through the side door into the narrow service alley outside. The door had barely closed when her hand locked around his collar and spun him hard against the brick wall. He gasped. "Don't," she said. He froze instantly. Stella pressed him firmly against the wall. Phone up.
Say it again. Look
Camera
at the camera.
recording.
You think
His
you can lie
face
your
fully
way out
visible.
of this?
He struggled. She tightened her grip. "The camera has your face," she said quietly. "It has your hands on my drink. Everything." He stopped struggling. "Who sent you?" Silence. Stella stepped closer. "Who sent you?" The man's eyes darted left, then right. His breathing fast and shallow. Nowhere to go. Nobody coming. His shoulders dropped. "Alexander Pierce," he whispered. Stella held the phone steady for 3 more seconds. Then she stepped back slowly. Looked at him one last time. "Thank you," she said calmly. She lowered the phone. Camera stopped recording. Screen cuts to black. Silence. "Who is Alexander Pierce?" You watched episode 1. You thought you understood the story. You thought a brown envelope behind a betting shop in Whitechapel was where it all began and ended. But that envelope was just the door. What is behind it? Is a world so dark, so deep, so dangerous that 2 detectives almost did not make it out alive. The story you thought you knew is just getting started. And trust me, it goes much deeper than you ever imagined. This is episode 2. The Fall. And nothing will ever be the same again.
Welcome to Crime Axis. Subscribe.
The phone rang twice before Mara answered. She was still awake. She had not slept properly in 3 days. The case that was not officially a case had been sitting at the back of her mind like a stone she could not stop turning over. She picked up on the second ring. "It's me," Marie said. Something in her voice made Mara sit up immediately. She had known Marie long enough to read every tone, every pause, every carefully chosen word. And right now Marie's voice had the particular quality of someone who had been holding something back for too long and had finally decided they could not hold it anymore. "Talk," Mara said simply. Marie talked. For 40 minutes she laid out everything. The CCTV report filed by the junior officer and marked as low priority. Thomas Garrett, 30 years at the National Crime Agency, spotless record, suddenly on indefinite leave following what his department called a personal matter. The black Range Rover outside the coffee shop on Lower Thames Street. 4 minutes. Engine running. Leaving at speed. The shell company that owned the vehicle fleet. 4 layers of deliberately complicated paperwork. And at the very bottom of all of it, 3 words. Pierce Capital Group. Mara sat completely still on the edge of her bed, listening to every word. The room was dark around her. Rain against the window. London doing what London always does at 3 in the morning. Moving quietly and keeping its secrets close. When Marie finished, there was a long silence between them. "How long have you known?" Mara said finally. "Long enough," Marie replied. "Too long." Another silence. "Elias told you to drop it," Mara said. It was not a question. "Yes," Marie said quietly. "And you are calling me instead." "Yes." Mara looked across her dark bedroom at nothing in particular. Her mind was already moving, already pulling threads, already connecting things she had not allowed herself to connect before. A name was sitting at the very back of her thoughts, pressing quietly against everything else. Victor Hale. She said nothing about it. Not yet. Not until she was sure. Not until she had something more than a feeling and a cold dread that had been sitting in her stomach since the moment Marie mentioned Pierce Capital Group. "No case file," Mara said. "No superior officers. Nobody knows except us." "Agreed," Marie said immediately. "We do this completely clean. Completely quiet." "Agreed." "And Marie," Mara paused for just a moment. "Whatever we find, we follow it all the way. No matter where it goes. No matter who it leads to." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. "No matter who it leads to," Marie confirmed quietly. They hung up. Mara sat in the dark for a long time after that. The rain kept coming. London kept moving. And somewhere across the city in a glass tower on the 14th floor of Canary Wharf an empire slept peacefully. Completely unaware that 2 women had just made a decision that would change everything. They started the following Monday. No announcement. No paperwork. No official anything. Just 2 detectives arriving at work slightly earlier than usual and staying slightly later. Running searches on personal devices instead of station computers. Meeting at Marie's flat in the evenings with coffee and printed documents spread across the kitchen table. The first week was slow, careful, methodical. They built a picture of Pierce Capital Group from the outside in. Public records, company's house filings, land registry documents, planning applications, government contract announcements. The company was everywhere. Infrastructure, healthcare procurement, property development, education. Its fingerprints were on half the public spending in London. And at the center of all of it, one name. Alexander Pierce. The more they dug, the more untouchable he appeared. Government advisory boards. Charitable foundations. Honorary degrees from 2 universities. A profile in the Financial Times describing him as one of the most respected businessmen of his generation. Photographs of him shaking hands with ministers, attending state dinners, sitting on panels about economic reform. "He is hiding in plain sight," Marie said one evening, staring at the documents spread across her kitchen table. Mara looked up from her laptop. "The best ones always do." It was during their second week of digging that Jason appeared. They had been tracing a particular shell company back through its directors when a name came up that led them to a small independent financial consultancy operating out of a serviced office in Southwark. Low profile. Barely any online presence. The kind of operation that existed specifically to be overlooked. They went in person. The office was on the 3rd floor of an unremarkable building 2 streets back from the river. Small. Tidy. A young woman at a reception desk, who looked surprised to have visitors. They asked for the director by name. He came out of the back office 2 minutes later. Jason, 36 years old. Lean, dark eyes that were warm and quick, and took in the room the way someone does when they have learned to read situations fast. He was dressed casually, open collar, no tie, but there was a sharpness underneath the easy manner that Mara clocked immediately. He looked at them both. His eyes settled on Mara for just a fraction of a second longer than was strictly professional. "Detectives," he said with an easy smile, extending his hand. "What can I do for you?" They asked their questions. He answered carefully, professionally, just enough to be helpful, and not enough to give anything away. Marie watched him the entire time with the particular expression she reserved for people she had not yet decided about. Mara asked most of the questions. Jason answered them looking at her directly. Clear, measured. But there was something else underneath it, something careful and contained, like a man who knew considerably more than he was saying and was trying very hard to decide how much of it was safe to share. They left with nothing concrete, just a business card and a feeling. Outside on the pavement, Marie looked at Mara. "He knows something," she said flatly. "I know," Mara replied. "He was looking at you the whole time." "I know that too," Mara said and kept walking. Jason called the following day. Not the station number they had left with the receptionist. Mara's personal number, which she had not given him. She stared at her ringing phone for a moment, then answered. "How did you get this number?" she said. "I have resources," he said. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it now that had not been there in the office. An edge. Urgency pressed down carefully under the easy tone. "Detective Hale, I think we should talk. Properly." "Not in an office." "About?" A brief pause. "About the company you are looking into. And about why you should be very careful about how you look." Mara was quiet for a moment. "Where?" she said. They met the next evening at a quiet pub near London Bridge. Corner table, away from the bar. Jason was already there when she arrived, coffee in front of him untouched, back to the wall, eyes on the door. He stood when she walked in. They sat across from each other, and for a moment neither spoke. The pub hummed around them. Normal Tuesday evening. Normal London. Nobody paying attention to anything except their own conversations. Jason looked at her carefully. "You are further into this than you should be," he said quietly. "Tell me something I do not already know," Mara replied. Something shifted in his expression. The edge of a smile. Reluctant, like a man trying not to be charmed by the wrong person at the wrong time. He looked down at his coffee. "I have been watching Pierce Capital Group for a long time," he said quietly. "Long before you started looking. Long before any of this." Mara watched him carefully. "Why?" she said. Jason looked up, met her eyes directly, and for just a moment, underneath all the careful composure and the measured words and the contained urgency, she saw something completely unguarded. He looked tired. Not the tiredness of someone who had not slept. The deeper tiredness of someone who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and had not yet found anywhere safe to put it down. "Because some things," he said quietly, "you cannot unknow." The pub hummed around them. Outside the rain had started again. Neither of them moved. Jason wrapped both hands around his coffee cup and looked at the table for a moment before speaking. "Pierce Capital Group has been stealing from public contracts for over a decade," he said quietly. "NHS procurement, infrastructure, housing. The money gets moved through shell companies so fast and so deep that by the time it settles nobody can trace it back." Mara watched him carefully. How do you know this? She said. Jason looked up, met her eyes directly, said nothing for a moment. Because I was inside it, he said. Not by choice, but inside it. The pub hummed around them. Mara kept her expression completely neutral. How far inside? She said. Far enough to know things that have already gotten people killed, he replied. Far enough to know that what happened to Thomas Garrett at that coffee shop was not a warning. It was a demonstration. Alexander Pierce wanted everyone watching to understand exactly what happens when someone gets too close. And yet here you are, Mara said, talking to me. Jason looked at her for a long moment. Yes, he said simply. Here I am. Something passed between them in that moment. Brief. Unspoken. Neither acknowledged it. Mara looked down at her notebook. Jason looked back at his coffee. I need names, Mara said. Accounts. Evidence. Something concrete. I know, Jason said. But not tonight. Why not tonight? He leaned forward slightly, voice dropping lower. Because if I give you everything tonight, and the wrong person finds out we met, neither of us walks away from this. I need to know I can trust you completely before I go that far. Mara held his gaze steadily. You called me, she said, on my personal number. You already decided to trust me. The edge of a smile crossed his face. Reluctant. Real. I decided to meet you, he said. That is not the same thing. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside the rain had picked up. London doing what London does, indifferent and relentless. Mara closed her notebook and stood. Same time Thursday, she said. Jason looked up at her. Same time Thursday, he confirmed. She walked out without looking back. But at the door, she paused for just a fraction of a second, so brief nobody would have noticed, then pushed through into the rain. Marie picked up on the first ring. Well, she said. He was inside Pierce Capital Group, Mara said, walking fast through the wet street. He knows everything. Names. Accounts. All of it. Then we need it, Marie said immediately. He is not ready to give it yet, Mara said. He needs to trust us first. A brief silence. How long? Marie said. Thursday, Mara replied. Another silence. Mara, Marie said carefully. Be careful. I am always careful, Mara said. That is not what I mean, Marie said quietly. Mara said nothing, kept walking. Rain falling around her. She knew exactly what Marie meant. Thursday came fast. Jason was already at the pub when Mara arrived. Same corner table. Same untouched coffee. But something was different tonight. He looked tired. The careful composure from their first meeting was still there but thinner. Like a man running out of time to keep pretending everything was under control. Marie was already in position 2 tables away. Back to the room. Newspaper open. Watching everything. Jason noticed Marie immediately. You brought someone, he said quietly. She is my partner, Mara said simply. She stays. Jason looked at Marie for a moment. Then back at Mara. Then nodded once. All right, he said. He reached into his jacket and placed a small USB drive on the table between them. Everything I have is on there, he said. Account numbers. Shell company directors. Transaction records going back 8 years. Enough to put Alexander Pierce away for the rest of his life. Mara looked at the USB drive. Then at Jason. Why now? She said. Why not before? Jason looked at her steadily. Because before, I did not have a reason good enough to risk my life, he said quietly. The table fell silent. Marie folded her newspaper and moved to their table without a word. She sat down and looked at Jason directly. "We need Thomas Garrett," she said. "He has evidence we cannot get anywhere else." Jason's expression shifted immediately. Something crossed his face: recognition, concern. He looked at Marie carefully. "You already found Garrett?" he said. "We are about to," Marie replied. Jason leaned forward. "Be careful with him," he said. "Garrett is not just a witness. He is—" The pub door opened. All three of them looked up simultaneously. Thomas Garrett walked in. He had not been called, had not been invited. He stood at the entrance scanning the room slowly, the habit of a man who always checked his exits first. His eyes moved across the pub methodically. Then they found Jason. Everything stopped. The two men stared at each other across the room. Neither moved. Neither spoke. But something passed between them in that moment, a whole conversation happening in complete silence. Recognition. History. Something unresolved and dangerous sitting between them like a third person in the room. Mara looked at Jason. Jason's jaw tightened. Mara looked at Thomas. Thomas's face had gone completely still. "Jason," Mara said quietly. "How do you know Thomas Garrett?" Jason did not answer immediately. His eyes stayed on Thomas for one long moment. Then he looked back at Mara. "He was not always on the right side," Jason said carefully. Thomas walked slowly toward their table and sat down without being asked. 3 days after the pub meeting, Jason called Mara. Not about the case this time. "Have you eaten?" he said. She almost said no, almost made an excuse. Instead she said, "No." They met at a small Italian restaurant in Bermondsey. Nothing fancy. Corner table. Candles. Rain outside as always. For 2 hours they talked about everything except Alexander Pierce. She laughed twice. Genuinely. He watched her like a man who had forgotten what it felt like to want something good. Walking back to her car, he stopped her gently. "Mara." She turned. He looked at her for a moment. Then quietly, "I need to tell you something. About the case. About everything." Her expression shifted immediately. Detective first. Always. "Tell me," she said. They sat in her car in the dark. Jason looked straight ahead. "I compiled that brown envelope," he said. "Every document inside it. The fraud records. The shell companies. The names. I put it all together from inside Alexander's organization. I dropped it behind the betting shop. I made that call to you at 2:47 a.m. Mara said nothing. I wanted to expose Alexander long before any of this," Jason continued. "Before I ever met you. But I was afraid. So I did it anonymously, hoping someone else would pick it up and run with it. You ran," Mara said quietly. "And then you came back." Jason turned and looked at her directly. "You came back too," he said. Silence between them. "Walk away, Mara," he said quietly. "Take what I gave you. Hand it to someone bigger. Walk away and stay alive." "I cannot do that," she said. "I know," he said. "That is what scares me." He reached across and held her hand for just a moment. Then he got out of the car and walked away into the rain. 2 days later, Jason was dead. No warning. No struggle. He was found in his Southwark office. Quiet. Clean. Alexander's signature all over it. Mara sat completely still when Marie told her. She did not cry. She did not speak. She just sat at her desk and looked at nothing for a very long time. Marie put a hand on her shoulder and said nothing. Sometimes nothing is the only right thing to say. Thomas Garrett lasted 4 more days. despite everything Marie had done to keep him safe. Alexander's reach was longer than any of them had imagined. Thomas was found at his flat. Gone. 2 witnesses. 2 deaths. 1 week. Mara stood up from her desk. "We finished this," she said quietly. Marie looked at her steadily. "We finished this," she agreed. Mara and Marie had 1 move left. They needed someone Alexander would never suspect. Someone who could get close enough to see everything. Someone beautiful enough that Alexander Pierce, a man who had never once shown weakness, would drop his guard completely. Her name was Stella McCartney, 32 years old. Sharp. Fearless. She had worked undercover twice before, and walked away clean both times. Mara briefed her in 1 hour. Stella asked 3 questions. Then she said yes. 2 weeks later, Stella was inside Alexander's world. She had been introduced through a carefully constructed cover, a private wealth consultant with the right connections and the right accent. Alexander noticed her immediately. Within a week he had invited her to dinner. Within 2 weeks he was calling her every evening. The untouchable man had found his weakness. Stella played it perfectly. Warm enough to keep him close. Careful enough to keep herself safe. Every dinner. Every conversation. Every quiet evening in his Canary Wharf penthouse, she was watching. Recording. Building the case piece by piece. She found everything. The full scale of the fraud. 8 shell companies. 47 government contracts systematically stripped of public money. The names of every person Alexander had silenced. Including Jason. Including Thomas. She passed it all to Mara and Marie in 3 separate drops over 10 days. The case was now airtight. Then something shifted inside the Pierce group. A junior associate noticed a discrepancy in an internal communication. Flagged it quietly to Victor. Victor took it straight to Alexander. Alexander sat with the information for 24 hours. Then he looked across the room at Stella. She was already watching him from the corner of her eye. She saw the look. Knew immediately what it meant. She had seen that look before. On Victor's face, on Elias's face, on the faces of every man in Alexander's world who had just decided someone was a problem. She had 1 evening left. Maybe less. That night at dinner Alexander was warm. Attentive. Perfect. He poured her champagne himself and smiled across the table like a man completely in love. Stella smiled back. Then excused herself quietly. "I will be right back," she said softly. She slipped into the dark corner alcove. Phone already out. Camera already recording. She watched Alexander nod almost imperceptibly toward a man across the restaurant. The man moved immediately toward her empty seat. Stella got every second on camera. She had him against the alley wall in 40 seconds. The confession came in under a minute. "Alexander Pierce sent me." Armed officers moved on Pierce Capital Group at 6 a.m. the following morning. Alexander was arrested in his penthouse. Victor was arrested at his Greenwich townhouse. Elias was picked up at Waterloo Station. 1 bag, 1-way ticket, Brussels. 3 names. 3 arrests. 1 empire destroyed. Mara was there when they brought Victor out. He came through the front door of his Greenwich townhouse in handcuffs, 2 officers either side of him. He was still wearing the same coat he wore to Sunday dinners. The same coat he wore coaching football on weekend mornings. He saw Mara standing across the street. He stopped walking for just a second. She did not look away. Neither did he. Then the officers moved him forward and he was gone. Mara stood alone on the wet pavement for a long time after the police car pulled away. She thought about Sandra. About the Sunday roasts and the warm house and the children running through the hallway. About 9 years of trusting a man completely. She thought about Jason. Then she stopped thinking altogether and walked back to her car. Marie watched Elias being processed at the station through a glass partition. He did not know she was there. He sat across the interview table, calm and composed even now, the same careful stillness that had made her fall for him in the first place. The same stillness she now understood had never been peace. It had always been calculation. She watched him for exactly 1 minute. Then she turned and walked away without looking back. 3 months later, Alexander Pierce stood in a Crown Court dock and heard the judge read 37 charges. Fraud. Conspiracy. 2 counts of manslaughter. He stood completely straight, completely composed, like a man who still believed the room could be controlled. The jury took 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. For the first time in 20 years, Alexander Pierce had nothing left to say. Mara and Marie were recognized formally by the commissioner 2 weeks after sentencing. Commendations. Handshakes. Photographs. Mara smiled for the photograph, then went home and sat quietly in her kitchen with a cold cup of coffee, thinking about a man who had held her hand in a dark car on a rainy London night. A man who never got to see how it ended. He started it all, she thought. That brown envelope behind the betting shop. That call at 2:47 a.m. That was Jason. He never stopped being brave. Even at the end. She looked out the window at the London rain. Then she picked up her coffee and moved forward. The most dangerous envelope in London was never about money. It was about the truth, and the people brave enough to carry it. Some secrets kill, but some secrets set everything free. Do well to subscribe. Bye for now.